everybody, I'm glad you're back with me. I would love to ask if, when you're watching this video, if you would leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about these stories. I know that I love them, but I want to make sure you do too. So, we're continuing on the story Dooger, the Grasshopper Hound. So that's the one we're working on right now. I also wanted to apologize because yesterday I did not post a story. I was not feeling very good. In fact, I wasn't feeling very good at all. But today, much better. So, Chapter 5, a surprise discovery about the fires. Uh-oh, wonder what that could be. Two Mom listened patiently while DJ explained what had happened this time. He was so upset he could hardly keep his voice from breaking. That means he felt like crying. When he finished, he sat down on one of the padded yellow and white chairs before the matching Formica kitchen table. Two Mom said, DJ, I can only ask your patience while we try to adjust to having doubled our family since Easter. I've been patient. Pris is wrecking my writings. She's rummaging through all my stuff. She's been told to stay out of my room. Dad grounded her and she's still doing it. She's never had a sister or brother, Two Mom explained. In fact, sometimes it seems she hardly had a father, because he was killed when she was so young. All she's had is me, and perhaps I've been too easy on her. But if you'll try to understand, DJ jumped up. I've tried to understand. I've done everything I know how, but she still drives me crazy. Now you make her stay out of my room and out of my things. Wow, he is super upset. Two Mom's eyes clouded. I have the feeling you mean that as kind of a threat, DJ. I just mean I'm not going to let her mess up my things again. He ran out the kitchen door, slamming it hard. Two Mom called back to him and made him come close it more gently. He did so, then put Hero on his chain and took him for a walk. But the boy was so upset he almost ran. DJ ended up at Alfred's home at the edge of town. Alfred had a book in one hand and Dooger's leash on the other. Alfred bent over and spoke sharply to the red hound. Dooger, you're going to make me mad. Not only are you giving DJ and me a bad reputation, but if you don't hurry up and learn something about trailing, my father's liable to make me give you away. He says a hound's no good that won't earn his keep by trailing coons or something that we can eat. You hear me? Eat a raccoon? I once knew a man who ate a raccoon. I don't think I would. Dooger yawned and laid his sad, wrinkled muzzle on his forepaws. He closed his big brown eyes and his long, floppy ears folded in the pine needles and the dust. Hi, Alfred, DJ said, tying the little hair-pulling bear dog to the bottom of the Milford's high front steps. Hero sniffed once at Dooger, then flopped down and looked out across the mountains. Hi, Alfred replied. He put down the book on the bottom step and sat beside it. What have you been doing? DJ told about Pris's latest raid on his room. Alfred nodded understandingly. Tag's about as bad sometimes, but you get used to it. Besides, my mother says that all kids outgrow such hassles and brothers and sisters grow up to even like each other. The porch door opened high above them. Both friends turned to see Tag come out and lean over the top rail. "What you doing?" Instantly, Dooger's head came up. He turned his big sad eyes to look at Alfred's little brother. The hound's heavily curved tail began wagging, sweeping a dusty spot of the pine needles and dirt. "We're training the dog," Alfred replied. "You go back inside so you won't bother us." "Don't have to," Tag said defiantly, shaking his tangled head full of short, dark curls. Alfred stood up and started to speak more firmly to Tag, but DJ took his arm. "Don't mind him, Alfred. Let's go for a walk. We can train Dooger in the woods." Alfred nodded and picked up the light chain used for the pup. "Good idea. Tag, you tell Mom where we went, okay?" "Don't have to," Tag replied. "I'm going with you." "No, you're not. And if you follow us this time, I'm gonna dunk you in the mill pond." Tag sighed and sank down on the top step. DJ took Hero's leash and Alfred led the red pup. Dooger had almost had to be dragged because he kept looking back at Tag. "Too bad Hero can't trail people," DJ said as they moved into the heavy stands of prime timber. Then he could teach Dooger by working with him. But Hero's a bear dog. "I've been reading about that," Alfred said, easing his way around a dainty-looking fern-like ground cover the local people called mountain misery. Not many bloodhounds are used with bear or other trail hounds because bloodhounds are just too slow. Usually bloodhounds trail people. DJ remembered that Dad guessed Dooger was a part redbone, a popular varmint trailhound. "If we can ever train Dooger," DJ said, "the redbone in him should make him faster than any bloodhound." "Yeah," Alfred agreed, "if we can ever train him." "We're not giving up yet," DJ reminded his friend. "Heads up ahead should be a good place to try again." They walked back past some deer or buckbrush, around some small blackberry vines, and across an open area which had been logged but not yet reforested. The friends discussed their plans. Alfred took both leashes so DJ wouldn't have to worry about Hero barking and giving his master's hiding place away. DJ then jogged across the open area toward a stand of timber that sloped down toward Mad River. DJ was perspiring lightly when he reached the first trees. That means he was sweating. That's good, because the trail should be easier to follow. He wiped his brow with his handkerchief to increase the scent, then tossed it in a clump of burgundy-colored mantanza, which is a type of plant, I think. Let me look it up and see. I could be pronouncing it wrong. A thickly branched bush. Its small leaves have smooth edges with white fuzz on the undersurface. The mantanza bush has twisted and gnarled, means bumpy, maroon-colored limbs that burn very hot in a fire. Mantanza may grow as tall as 20 feet and can provide thick cover for bears and other animals. Oh, well, now we know what it is. DJ moved carefully through some young black oaks that thrust their wide leaves only a few feet above the ground. Ponderosa saplings were just pushing their way through the undergrowth towards the cloudless blue sky. DJ raised his arms to protect his face against the increasingly dense growth. That means it was getting very bushy in there. At the edge of the clearing, perfectly shaped ponderosa pine trees had limbs within 3 to 4 feet of the ground. But 100 yards farther on, ponderosas mixed with sugar pines and incense cedar grew 3 to 6 feet apart. The competition was so keen, none of the trees had any limbs for 30 or 40 feet. Wow. They had to stretch up to get sunlight. The sugar pines and ponderosas rose majestically to heights equal to 10, 18, or even a 20-story building. Farther down the slope, DJ knew there was one Douglas fir said to be 350 years old and perhaps 30 stories tall. That's very, very tall. The boy ran a zigzag course through the undergrowth that grew in the sun. DJ continued into the dense shade of the towering trees where the lack of sunlight prevented undergrowth. That means there wasn't shrubs and other bushes under the trees. He tried to be noisy to scare off any rattlesnakes that might be around. When he was panting hard, DJ stopped and raised his eyes, looking for a good place to hide from Dooger. The black oaks weren't tall enough. The western white fir or Christmas trees were too pretty to risk breaking limbs by climbing in their medium heights. The tall ponderosa and sugar pine were so high that if DJ climbed to the first limb and fell, he'd be killed. But DJ found a solution. He came to a fairly young incense cedar with very rough bark. The boy climbed it about 20 feet, then eased out on the branch and transferred to a ponderosa. Whoa, he climbed from one tree to another, where the second row of branches grew. The first branches were high enough off the ground to make it look at first as if it wasn't a tree for climbing. The lower branches would also hide DJ. The boy settled himself against the trunk, brushed the sticky sap from his hands, and peered out through the branches. He's peeking out through them. Then he waited for Alfred and Dooger to find him. The mountains were still. There was no breeze. Somewhere in the depths of the forest, a woodpecker drummed on a tree. Something like that. Of course, I lost my place. A red-tailed hawk skimmed silently overhead, probably looking for a mouse or a squirrel, something to eat. Half an hour later, DJ was discouraged. He couldn't hear Dooger baying at the trail. That probably meant the pup had failed again. Suddenly, a sound caught DJ's ears. Automatically, he held his breath. His eyes darted around. A twig snapped. It was a sound common in the forest, for deer often plunged away, breaking fallen limbs. A bear might also crush sticks. But this sound was followed by a movement on the ground. The movement had been brief and was gone as completely as a person's shadow when he stepped from the open into the dense shade of the towering trees. DJ knew that anything that moved could be seen. Anything that froze and remained still might go unnoticed even from a few feet away. The movement he had glimpsed had been human. not animal. He knew that, though he hadn't seen enough to know anything else about the person. DJ's gaze penetrated the shelter of his high perch. He held his breath and listened until his ears seemed to ring in the silence. But there was no baying of the hound on the trail. There was no encouraging shout of a happy hunter urging his dog on. DJ's eyes moved on from the dense shadow under the tall conifers towards an open area. In the sunlight, he saw manzanita, ponderosa, cedar, black oak saplings, and lots of mountain misery. DJ had read in school that the Miwok Indians who used to live here had called the dainty fern-like growth kit dizzle. The forest people called it bear clover. They hated it because it was full of resin which literally exploded in a fire. To help reduce the risks, every few years the forestry people came through with a drip torch and burned up the clover. So I'm going to read you what a drip torch is. A handheld aluminum container filled with a mixture of diesel fuel and gasoline. The fuel flows through a coil-like nozzle with a wick wrapped in a heavy screen which is kept burning. Fuel moves through the lighted wick and lands on the bushes to be burnt. So they're burning that up so that it can't start a big fire later. In the spring, DJ knew Mountain Misery had a pretty white flower, which looked like snow. Local people called it Mountain Misery because it smelled up hands or clothes when touched or walking through. The school teachers called it the carpet of the forest, but by any name Dad had once explained, it just plain stinks. Suddenly, DJ's eyes caught another movement. Tag? DJ whispered. What's going on? What's he doing out there all by himself? Then DJ knew. Tag had followed DJ and Alfred. Tag was probably lost, though he didn't seem concerned. For a moment, DJ debated about giving up his hiding place, but he knew Tag was not supposed to be out there alone. So DJ retraced his steps down the tree. As he touched the ground, he began to run. DJ suddenly stopped and sniffed. Smoke! DJ whirled in a circle, shading his eyes against the sun, trying to find the source of the smoke smell. He saw nothing, but his nose told him the smoke was coming from about where he'd last seen Tag. In less than a minute, DJ had found Alfred's little brother standing at the edge of a clearing. Tag was looking at a curl of smoke rising lazily above some neatly piled pine cones, dry needles, and dry twigs. The explosive Mountain Misery was within 2 feet of the tiny fire. DJ rushed forward and shoved the little boy aside. DJ began scraping dirt with his cork-soled boots. The dirt landed on the rising plumes of smoke, which had twisted wildly as though trying to escape, then slowly fell back and died. DJ made sure there was no fire. Then he turned angrily to Tag. You should have your britches paddled hard with you in them. Britches is an old name for pants. Tag, don't you know better than to do this? What's that you got behind your back? Hold your hands out and let me see. The little boy slowly brought both small hands out. 3 wooden kitchen matches lay in each palm. I found them, he said. Sure you did. DJ grabbed the matches. He knelt in front of Alfred's little brother. I can't believe this. I know your father and mother taught you not to play with matches, and especially here in the timber. I found them, the little boy repeated, his lower lip starting to quiver at the sternness of DJ's tone. DJ snapped, I feel like giving you a good shake. You could have gotten yourself hurt or burned to death, plus burning down this whole town. You gonna tell on me? You bet. You deserve a good spanking. That was a very dumb thing to do. Don't you ever do anything like that again. Promise. Will you tell? I've got to, Tag. Tears flooded down the corner of the little boy's eyes and his chin quivered. If I promise not to do it again, will you not tell? The first big tear slid down the boy's cheek and splattered in the dust. DJ found himself hugging the little boy. I should tell, DJ said softly, feeling the boy's trembling body against his cheek. But if you promise never, never to do this again, well, I won't tell. Not even Alfred? Not even him. But you've got to cross your heart. Tag wiped the back of his dirty hand across the tears slipping down his cheek. Then slowly he crossed his heart with his right hand. I promise, he said with a sniff. Instantly, DJ wished he hadn't said he wouldn't report the incident, but before he could say anything more, he heard a hound baying. Tag's face lit up. Dooger! You're right. Come on, let's play a little game with that red hound pup. A game? Yes, come on, I'll explain it to you. DJ grabbed the little boy's hand and began running, but even as he did, fear hit DJ with the speed of a rattler's strike. Could Tag possibly be the firebug? Instantly, DJ had the feeling he had made a serious mistake, promising not to tell anybody what he had just seen. Wow, that's the end of the chapter. Do you think DJ made a terrible mistake? Do you think he really should tell what Tag did? Do you think he's really the firebug? Well, we'll find out later. Tomorrow's story will be Chapter 6, DJ follows a story to the airport. Well, we'll find out what that's about tomorrow. So I just want to remind you, I love you. I really do. But even more important, God loves you, and He always will. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or rest of your night. I'm not sure when you're listening to this. And I will be reading to you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye. God bless.